Item 10, subject to the discussion on the public hearing. Any discussion on the public hearing?
I'm sorry.
Oh, I thought you were saying something.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a couple of things on the public hearing. I don't know if this goes into finalizing the budget or discussion, but for those keeping score, there was like 4 comments against the SRO, 3 in favor of it. In terms of music, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 folks spoke in favor of restoring the music position. 2 people spoke in support of where we were. We had at least four people discuss in the negative about having the security set up without it being itemized. 4 people mentioned that. 1 person said they could go either way with that. 5 people spoke against armed guards, and one of those that had spoken against the SROs was also citing, or 2 of them were citing that they didn't like the idea that the SRO was armed. And there was some discussions on capital, as we heard, and possibly allocating additional funds from surplus towards this year's budget, which, you know, was mentioned. So just as a recap, as I got it.
If the other item B then is to finalize the budget, which means we vote on the final budget to bring forth to the referendum. Reminding that once we vote on the budget, we can't, the referendum is that we can't advocate or oppose the budget publicly. You know, the budget, we can discuss it in terms of what's on it, what's off it, but you can't advocate one way or another as a member of the board on the referendum. So,
like a motion?
Yeah, you want a motion to approve the budget?
I move we go to the district meeting on May 7th, 2018, followed by a referendum on May 8th, 2018, with a 2018-19 Regional District 13 gross education budget of $36,819,319.
Second.
Any discussion?
I did want to just discuss the music like a bit more. While I have complete and utter faith, you know, in your administration, you know, with if they say the programming is not going to be affected at all, I trust that, but I think we also have an obligation to listen to our parents, and if it's something that, you know, they really feel very strongly about, you know, I feel like it's something that we should, you know, reconsider putting into the budget, and I'd be interested in hearing other members' thoughts on that.
I think about the thought that was shared in public comment about things like metalworking, auto shop, woodworking, other things that I'm sure students got satisfaction from, things that could address creativity, other elements. Personally, I'd never engaged in music and engaged in a lot of those things, and I do think that they helped me as well. At the end of the day, I take Dr. Veronesi's recommendation, and I'm not in favor of reinstating.
If we're going in order, I would have no problem putting it back in, is where I stand. I think a lot of people are very passionate about it, and I did hear the constituents come out, and and Dr. Taylor and I had tried to bring that forward once before, so I am in favor of putting the music back in.
Well, I love music and do it, but I'll repeat a remark that I made a couple of months ago. As we see declining enrollment and declining budget, there have to be cuts in more. There have to be at least reorganizations and a reduction in the amount of money spent on a lot of things besides classroom teachers. And I see this as the painful beginning of a process that needs to go on and on. So I am in favor of accepting the budget as Dr. Veronesi submitted it, and as we previously amended it at our last meeting.
And I'm inclined to agree with that very same sentiment. I was opposed to it. I have all the faith in the world in the administration. I was a little concerned about a person who tonight said, if we don't add it back in, we will be degrading the music experience. And I find that not the case. I would also suggest that any motion to the positive in adding this back in would be out of order. We've already voted on this, and it's the one item we've already carried. And so I would suggest that if anyone makes a motion, it probably should be ruled out of order.
I think I can challenge that, because I do think that we can amend the budget tonight, if the board so chose. We would just have to
Well,
find that money somewhere else.
You're welcome to challenge it, but I would suspect if we got a ruling from our esteemed attorneys up in Hartford on the 25th floor, that it might be considered out of order. I mean, it's already been moved, seconded, and defeated.
The dollar amount for the budget has been, so if we did want to do something like that, I do believe we have to stay with the same dollar amount, because that's what went to the hearing. So we could theoretically put the music back in, but maybe we'd have to reduce somewhere else.
The motion that was made was in favor of reinstating the .5 FTE in the music department, and it was voted, it failed. So I think that you can probably address music in a different way if you were just to assign additional monies to music without putting the FTE. It might be a different activity, which would be a different motion, not to reinstate the FTE. You know, that was the motion that was made and failed. So if somebody was interested in restoring additional monies to the thing, like Dr. Veronese, reallocate monies in the program without adding the FTE, that might be a separate motion that could be considered.
And that could be considered, but as far as I'm concerned, that's trying to get something in the back door that doesn't fit through the front. But that's my position, that's all.
We did that with the phys ed last year, remember? Same kind of thing, so.
Well, if no action has been taken on that motion, a person that had voted in the affirmative could make a motion to rescind that motion. I mean, we're back to that discussion.
When I
It's
talked
not
to
noticed.
When I talked to the lawyer about how to rescind, we'd have to put notice, it's a special meeting, we'd have to put notice in the paper that we were planning to rescind the motion. So I think I tend to.
Can we just continue going around with people's sense of it, because we may just find that we're not gonna change our vote, so we can short tail all that.
Yeah. Well, I, like Nancy, was in favor of it the last time we had discussed it, and I was in favor of doing it without an increase in the budget through the salary line item. Again, no disrespect to the administration or anything like this, but my view on it is that with all of the other discussions we have around restructuring the schools, the strategic visioning going forward, there's going to be a lot of changes coming up, and I think at some point this will just come out ultimately in the wash, so that's one of the reasons. And again, to gain support for the budget, I'd hate to see people voting down the budget because of this issue. That would be really my only reason for supporting it, or not my only reason. I think it's a good reason to go forward. That was my opinion.
And I'm kind of caught in the middle. I hear what you're saying about people not supporting the budget because there's been support for the music position, but I also heard Kathy pretty loud and clear that the cut is not going to impact the music program. And basically what I've been hearing is not so much the music program, but the individual instrument lessons and the size of the classes. That's what I've been hearing more. And I guess I have my own philosophy about private instrument lessons in schools. Having also, I played an instrument, which I learned outside of school. I'm tending more towards how Kathy feels. I've also am a retired teacher, and if you have an administrator who is looking at staffing and time, and especially what I know of Kathy and how she is so supportive of her staff and so supportive of the education process and the students, she isn't going to burden the teachers with additional time by cutting this position. I just don't think that's going to happen. So I'm in favor of just leaving it as it is by leaving the position out.
I have direct skin in the game here. I don't want to get too specific, but perhaps it's 2 French horns going at once, a flute, and a piano. Well, not all at once, but usually in competition. I hear the feedback. It's difficult for a teacher, there's no question, in a room with 12 different instruments. What's it going to be? We need 12 teachers in one room? That's the difficult part. A parent can make a decision on the instrument to get private lessons, should more desire for that student to excel in that particular instrument, to do that. You know, we talk about fairness all the time, and here's the big, real issue that pains me about what we do. If you're going to offer something, not everybody can afford $150 a month to rent an instrument. And I'm not advocating we now buy every instrument for every student, but if you're going to do it, embrace it fully. And I'm not advocating we should do that. There's no win situation here, you know. And I know we have all these studies that show the advances that students have with music, and I can't disagree with that by any means. But I think that we have a lot of priorities, and difficult decisions have to be made. And I'm going to have to agree with Dr. Berenice's real forthright judgment that it's not going to affect the program. And I do support where we are now.
So you definitely know where I stand on the music component. I would have to say, though, I do agree with Norm on his interpretation of the motion and what was done previously. I think recognizing that, and it was something I completely had forgotten about as far as the ability to move forward with a motion that effectively is the same motion that was made previously. I don't think it's something we can do. It should in no way be interpreted as me not being fully supportive of the music program. But I would like to speak on just the general kind of philosophy behind what we're taking away from this and moving forward into the upcoming years. I think, when we consider things like music, we have got to set priorities within this Board of Education so that we don't nickel and dime different programs until they're non-existent. This is exactly the process that starts to happen. You take a little bit from here, you take a little bit from there, and then 10 years later, your program is no longer the program that it was. We have got to, as a board, step forward and say, these are priorities, no cuts are coming from here. If anything, we're going to increase the budget in these areas. These are not priorities. This is where the cuts are coming from. This is where we think the vision is for the future, and move forward with it in that way. I've never liked looking at little individual components of each thing and trying to make decisions like that. I think we need to take a straightforward approach in the future, identify what we think are the priorities, and move forward in that way.
Thank you all. I looked at, with Kathy, all the schedules of the different music teachers. There will be plenty of coverage. I think my support for the music has been really about making the people that have come forward to support the budget, to support the school, or in fact that group of people that have come forward and said, don't cut the budget. These are people that participate in the program, they work on the POPs program, they're involved in our school on a daily basis, most of the folks that we've heard from, and they're passionate about it. I think that one thing that could be done to deal with it is to just show what the music program is. I'm not sure people, except for their kid and what grade they're in, know what the music program is for the following year. I'm not sure that they know what happens when it gets to 6th grade or what happens when they get to 7th grade. And it might be good in this next couple of weeks before the budget is, if we just have an explanation of, what happens in these programs and what is the level of activity, just so that people understand that this is what music is in this school, and this is why a half a person here doesn't have an impact. And that might, I don't know if it's possible.
Sure, and I think, as I mentioned to the board, that the high school actually had enough capacity with staffing to offer new classes next year. There are responsibilities that music teachers have that are not music responsibilities now, that could be directed. For instance, a middle school teacher who can go to Memorial to teach 6th grade instrumental for a grade that we anticipate will be going to the middle school in potentially another year. A situation where 2 music teachers are teaching the same band. We don't do that anywhere. It's not necessarily value added to have that. So, and I think that to say that we identify something as a priority, and that making a cut isn't synonymous with something not being a priority. I think the reality of moving forward as we prioritize, there are different ways to say this is a priority. Music is so important in this district. I do not see that this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning of cuts. This is economy of scale, economy of size, and then we're holding, and then we're going to find that we have staff who have more time in their schedule to do different things, to then there's another phase of, for instance, what we're doing in the high school. Potentially, if we kept the philosophy and scheduling moving forward in the high school, we probably could have made reductions to a 0.8 for our music people in the high school. Instead, we added the capacity for our teachers to add more and different offerings for students. We're actually offering a class called Backstage for students who aren't our performers, but are part of Backstage. Our guitar class, we're able to do some of the practices that used to have to happen outside of the school day are now happening during the school day because our staff really have the time in their schedule to do that.
Any further discussion?
On that topic or the budget?
Budget.
On the
Well,
budget?
actually, we have a motion on the floor.
Exactly.
We don't have a motion.
We
Yes,
didn't.
Yes, you do.
You
You have a motion,
and a
I
second.
seconded.
Yeah, but he's talking about the.
But that's what the discussion
But
should be
that's-
on that motion.
on that
Yeah,
And this
he's
was related to
discussing-
that.
And he's
Right.
discussing the budget on the motion.
The motion is the budget. That's
Correct.
what I was going to discuss because there was no
Thank you.
motion on the teacher.
Of course not.
Right, okay. So one of the things I heard pretty loud and clear, and I actually asked the question, when we allocated the $400,000 towards security, I asked the question at the time, should we stipulate that $400,000 cannot be used for armed guards? We can maintain the SRO, but not the armed guards. So at this time, and no one wanted to take up that discussion, but at this time, I'd like to make a motion that as part of the budget, that $400,000 allocated to security will not be used for armed guards in our schools.
I think that's an unnecessary consideration if you
Well,
made
Is there a
it.
second for the motion?
Yeah, you need a second
Oh,
for
sorry.
discussion.
Hold on.
That's fine.
I can't hear.
Don't we need a second?
Yes, you do need that.
We also-
If no one seconds, I have no discussion.
We also had a motion at the March 26th meeting, which, and I'll find it in a minute. It said, Mr. Auger made a motion, seconded by Dr. Taylor, to amend Dr. Frederick's motion to be a school's resource officer for the district designated to manage an armed presence at each building and remove the security monitor position. And that motion passed as amended, which was, the original motion was by Dr.
The motion to amend my motion passed.
Right.
However, we tabled that motion.
We indicated we tabled it, but there was no indication of a vote on that, so
No.
the implication is that it's tabled. So, but we didn't take any action.
So the motion's in order.
Yeah, so I just want to clear that up, but, so there was an action on that. So now you.
That was to include the armed guards.
Right.
Okay. My motion is to preclude.
And include the armed guards where,
Well, that's
Why
my,
don't we just kill the first motion and then, that one's been tabled, right? I mean, it seems like we should just bring that one back up and do away with it. If you're that, I mean, because he's effectively trying to make a motion that would sort of undo the one that's already tabled, so.
Well, the
Yes,
one
veto
that
my
was
motion
tabled
first.
was to fund an SRO and 5 armed guards.
Right.
What we did pass was a motion to fund $400,000 in this budget for undesignated security measures, which I think most of us had in mind, an SRO and other stuff, but it could go towards an armed guard. And I don't believe there's a lot of support for having armed guards in all of our schools.
I agree with that statement, but the reason that I don't think it's necessary is that at utilization, we're talking about all these options, and so far it has been clear that that is not something that's coming up to the priority. But when you said that it seemed like everyone was in favor of an SRO and some other measures, that did not include me. So that would, then I would go back to this vote. So I just want to be clear on what you're talking about. You can speak for yourself for sure.
Okay,
not
I'm
me.
speaking
Thank
for
you.
myself.
Thank you.
So I made a motion. Is there a second?
this is a, you want to help me, this would be a motion to amend your motion to include this in the budget, or just?
No, the
separate?
budget's already, it's already in the budget.
Right.
My motion is simply
to
that
clarify.
$400,000 for security specifically cannot be spent, because it's not designated specifically for anything, it cannot be spent on armed guards in any of the 5, or in the 5 schools.
What about an SRO?
That's my,
That would be,
concern.
that, I think I said accepting an SRO. So the SRO is still in,
I will
but the
second the
5
motion.
armed guards are.
As long as you clarify accepting the SRO.
Right, that's where,
Okay.
that's when I will
Is that-
accept the motion.
Is that clear then? Is the motion clear? And we have 2 people that are willing to second it, if it's clear.
So in any of this, 4 other schools, in no armed guards unless, except for perhaps this SRO.
Perhaps an SRO.
I think so.
Perhaps an SRO. Doesn't mandate the SRO, it just says we can have an SRO, which would be a state police, right, I believe, or a retired state police. Other than that, no armed guards.
And I did second that
You have a
motion,
second?
because I do believe Dr. Veronese gave a good explanation tonight, that an SRO is not just at the high school. The SRO would benefit the entire district.
Right.
It's complicated.
Yeah, I know. And I think,
Well, there's no mentioning of tabling it, so, but there was no vote.
There's no vote to
well, at least we don't know if there was a vote. We can't.
Well, sure we do, because it doesn't say so.
Right, we know that.
And
there's
we've
no
already approved
vote on
this, so
the record.
that's the official record.
I think, though, in good faith and due diligence on the board's part, this motion just helps give clarity to move forward. regardless of the ambiguity that we're finding in that motion with tabling.
Well, we're committed to following Robert's rules.
Yes, we are.
So, but I have to say that if you would do you have the text of that motion?
Well, the motion,
Part of his
I don't think I have that.
the original motion is, Dr. Frederick made a motion, seconded by Mrs. Petrella, to include a school resource officer in the maximum rate in the 2018-19 budget. There was a significant amount of discussion, and then Mr. Auger made a motion, seconded by Dr. Taylor, to amend Dr. Frederick's motion to be a school resource officer for the district designed to manage an armed presence at each building and remove the security monitor position. You with me?
Yes.
Totally.
All right. It goes on again to, there was a vote on amending the original motion, which passed unanimously. But I don't see where the amended motion was passed.
That's when we
Victor
reached-
at that time he tabled his.
He asked
He
it,
tabled
he
his.
tabled
He
it.
asked.
But we didn't, because there was no vote to table.
Yeah, tabling requires.
Right.
We said we
So
needed more
we-
information, namely what it was gonna cost.
We improperly
That's all,
tabled,
that's all in there.
but we clearly didn't act on it.
Well,
We
but it
improperly
was not,
tabled.
it wasn't actionable.
But that's why I just think that tonight, to move forward in clarity,
Yeah, so
Effectuating
what
this
is our
motion.
remedy to that situation, that
right,
we
we need to move
did not
forward.
table properly?
So I actually would suggest that, that we simply defeat my motion. Let's have a vote on it.
Your
My motion as amended.
Your
That-
motion.
My motion as amended.
You
My
indicated-
motion as amended.
No, that's what you're saying, it was never voted
But I
on.
think that was, but I think now it's a dead issue, because
Dead issue.
we didn't vote to postpone or
Fine.
vote to table.
So it's still floating in the air then.
I disagree. I think it's, I didn't bring my point. so.
If it's dead, it's dead. And
We'll call it dead.
I would consider it a dead issue, because it wasn't tabled, nor was it postponed at that meeting.
So
So it's dead. So if it's dead, we don't have to worry about it.
so it's a
In
motion.
all my years of,
Makes sense.
I get it, but still tonight, Bob's just trying to give clarity tonight.
No,
for
we're just
this.
putting this one to
Yeah.
bed, so
Yeah.
his can go.
Restriction,
I-
legal restriction on them.
I think this one probably could move forward.
Okay.
I think it's complicated enough, and our intention was to end it, and it never took the final votes on everything. It was really confusing
Right,
that night.
but part of the reason that we did do that is also why I'm not in favor of this particular, and will be voting
Yes,
against it.
yes, it goes on to say, Dr. Frederick then requested his original motion with the amendment be tabled till the next meeting.
Oh, there it
But
is.
that was never voted on, so therefore,
Well, the intent was
I would,
there anyway.
I would suggest that the whole thing is out of order.
Yeah. Everything since then is out of order.
Great. That part's out of.
Oh, my God, a week's
Is
worth of
it
work.
possible that some of these things can just be discussions where the board has consensus without moving quickly to motions? Because it
That's what I'm
appears
trying
as
to
though
get,
there's a
yes.
consensus, and there's a plan from, and this is kind of, I think, asking a question and making a suggestion at the same time as we're moving forward. We seem to be putting motions out that perhaps could just continue to be discussions where there's a consensus that's clearly indicated in the discussion on the board, that I believe the board has reached consensus about the presence of armed guards, armed security, which is not interested.
I don't think the public is fully confident in that,
I would agree.
Which is why I think it's
Which
good
is-
that we're doing this right now.
which is why I'm making.
And the motion's on the
I'm
floor,
making
it's
the
been
motion
seconded.
that we did vote to include $400,000 in our budget. That $400 was not specified. We've heard a number of people that, on general principles, are against, unspecified funds in the budget, and others that are specifically upset about it because of the armed guard potential. I know I personally don't believe that armed guards in our schools, level of training, all of that, I'm not in favor of it. And so therefore, I'd like to specifically preclude that $400,000 from being used for that purpose, but still leave open the opportunity to have an SRO. And that's why I made the motion. And if that motion is a good motion,
I believe it is.
and we've had a second,
Was there a second?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
so
my
we've had,
second.
we've had,
Yes.
yeah, we actually had 2 seconds, almost at identical time, so.
All right.
So we've got a motion and a second.
Through
So
the chair, could I
do
ask the
think-
maker of the question?
Sure.
When you say armed guards, are you including or excluding an SRO?
I was specifically allowing an SRO to, the 400,000 could go towards an SRO. That SRO could be armed because it would be a state police.
Okay, so you're separating armed guards from SRO?
Yes,
Thank you for the clarification.
yep.
So I hear you about undesignated. We had a list of 15 items. You've just chosen one. People spoke about film in both directions as well. I just don't think it's necessary, and I think the better process is, let's talk about these at utilization. Talk about these things. I don't think it's necessary to go through point by point in motions, but that's all.
I do disagree with that, because I think right now the public is paying attention to this, and we need to pass a budget, and we need to be transparent.
Any other discussion on this? This is clear, everybody's clear what it does. Limits Bill's committee to one item out of the list, okay?
I would just like, I'm sorry to say that I'm not in favor of armed guards unless I know something about who they are. But I'm not in favor of precluding them because we don't know who they are either. If by non-state police armed guards is, I believe, what you're talking about. And I just think that I can't imagine a scenario in which I would agree unless they were highly trained people. And I saw some evidence that they mattered, but I don't think that it's a good idea, following Andrew's nickel and dime budget process, analysis of our budget process, to chip away at the edges of a plan before we actually have a plan.
Well, we have to give Kathy direction to
Well,
bring an SRO in immediately. So to Laura's point, that is something she can do overnight. Kathy can start moving forward with an SRO immediately with this motion.
So, well, she
And
can
with the budget passing.
without the
et cetera.
motion, too.
Right, but it's,
Any other discussion?
You know, I hear what you're saying, but as far as, you know, not putting restrictions on something before we get farther into it and get more input, but I think the message was pretty loud and clear about armed guards. And I know I too, where I think when the motion was on the floor, I was thinking, yeah, okay, yes, armed guards. And then I thought about it after hearing the public, and I said, maybe that's not such a good idea. You know, there's one thing having a security officer that's not armed, at least keeping an eye on a perimeter, that's one option, but there's no gun involved or anything. But to have armed guards, I think kind of takes it much farther. And even in our discussion and utilization, we looked a lot about, you know, interior processing, like Kathy was talking about tonight. What do you do when something happens? You know, who's, you know, it's not going to be a go-to person. There's going to be a whole process, and that's what you're working on. We talked about how important that was. And I don't think we talked as much, a little bit about, we did talk about the SROs, but I don't think we ever got into the discussion of armed guards. We talked about entryways and windows and SRO, pretty much across the board. So I would feel comfortable putting that restriction on it. And I think knowing full well that maybe it wouldn't happen in this budget, but let's say circumstance changed, we at least have a cushion to do some things. But let's say circumstances change, and maybe that's the direction you go in as an armed guard. There's another budget next year. You know, it may not be something that has to happen this year. so we're making sure that people know that, but it's not gonna happen this year.
Right,
But
what I don't like
next year, we'll
about
have a
the,
lot more information under our belts.
totally, what I don't like about the preclusion is, yes, you're right, we didn't spend a lot of time at the last utilization. We had a pretty full session as it was. When we were talking about armed guards the previous time, what I shared is that North Branford, after Sandy Hook, not after Parkland, after Sandy Hook, installed armed guards at all buildings. I have a brother who works in that district and 6 nieces and nephews who went through there, and they look favorably upon it. I understand that we have heard from people who are against it, but I am sure there are others who will be for it. And I just don't like that we're precluding discussion. What we said in that room is, we're not ready to decide how to spend that 400,000 because we are trying to evaluate and create a plan. And I just think it's
Right.
interesting to hamstring that plan
But I
before
think-
we've gotten
but
very,
because
we have
it's-
not touched a priority column.
No, because we're so new in the process and there's enough concern among the public about armed guards that I think it's good to clarify it. I think it would be very wise to clarify at this point that it's not gonna be a consideration. By next year, we probably will have a much more concrete plan. And then when something is put in the budget, it'll probably be for more concrete safety. That's the way I'm thinking, more concrete safety.
At the meeting following this meeting,
Can we call the question?
Kim gave us a report that the armed guards would be in the region of $500,000 or $550,000.
Expensive.
So that, I think if your motion limits the $400,000, it doesn't limit us from going back and putting this in the budget in the future.
Right.
I mean, all you said out of the, I think as I recall what your motion is that in this $400,000, we're not gonna do that.
Right.
So that's not gonna preclude us for the following year or for the
Right.
long-term plan to get more guards into the system if that's what's
Right.
called for in the future.
It's just
But
right,
out of this
that's what I said.
2018-19 budget,
This
Don't-
specific $400,000 cannot be used
Just
for
make
that
that-
purpose.
just make sure
So it's
that's
just for
clear
now.
in our vote.
It's just for now,
It's just for clarity for tonight.
clarify.
Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 9, 4, 6, and 4. Passed.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4.
4 against.
6, 4, and 4 against.
No, it's, yeah.
6 in favor.
Six
in
Don't
favor.
use the word for.
Yeah.
Then 4. Thank
So
you.
the motion passed.
Then can
Now we have back to the main motion on the adoption of the budget.
Can we move that motion?
It's been moved
I mean,
and
It's been
seconded.
made, seconded.
Is there any other
move the
discussion?
question? Is
No,
that
don't do
the
that,
right
because then you have to vote to do that. Just don't discuss.
Is there any other discussion?
that. Thanks, Phil.
What's the one you do to call the vote?
Get her done.
You don't need to do
No.
You already
The
did it, and I'll
question.
second that.
Okay.
Oh, we have a,
Okay, now we have a vote on
question.
whether the question is called.
yes. And
Correct.
We have a motion and a second on to move the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Now we have a vote on the main motion.
As amended.
As amended.
No.
Okay, could we hear the main motion as
The
amended?
main motion is to go to district meeting on May 7th, 2018, followed by a referendum on May 8th, 2018, with the 2018-19 Region District gross education budget of $36,819,319, with the amendment that the $400,000 not be used to hire armed guards.
Other than an
Exception of
SRO.
SROs,
Correct.
Not, yes,
with the exception.
I assume you are included, not excluding the SRO.
It
Not
does.
excluding
It
the
does.
SRO.
Okay,
So that's the motion on the floor.
that's the motion on the floor. We have to vote now.
We
All in
do.
favor?
All in favor.
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is public comment.
Adjournment.
Public comment.
We're going back to town meetings.